Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. 15 Years of Loyalty. Derek Harvey adjusted his tie in the bathroom mirror of Stevens and Associates Construction, the same reflection he'd seen every morning for 15 years. At 42, he still carried himself with the disciplined posture of his military days, though the gray threading through his dark hair betrayed the weight of corporate life. His calloused hands, remnants of his time in Army Corps of Engineers, straightened the collar of his pressed shirt. The company had grown from a small residential contractor to a major commercial operation during Derek's tenure. He'd started as a project manager fresh out of his military service, bringing precision and integrity that Bernard Stevens initially valued. Derek's methodical approach and unwavering ethics had saved the company millions in potential lawsuits and regulatory fines over the years. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife, Kendra. Emma's fever spiked to 103 degrees Fahrenheit. Doctor wants to see her immediately. Can you come home? Derek's chest tightened. Their 8-year-old daughter, Emma, was everything to him and Kendra. After years of trying to conceive, Emma's arrival had felt miraculous. Now, with Kendra's part-time nursing schedule at the local clinic, they developed a system where Derek could flex his hours when needed. He walked to Bernard's corner office, passing the framed photos of luxury projects that Derek had personally overseen. Bernard Stevens, a portly man in his late 50s with thinning hair and expensive suits that couldn't hide his soft lifestyle, was on the phone arguing with someone about permit delays. "Bernard, I need to take today off," Derek said when the call ended. "Emma's sick and needs to go to the doctor." Bernard barely looked up from his computer. "Can't Kendra handle it? We got the Morrison site inspection today. She's already at the clinic working a double shift to cover for someone. Emma's running a high fever. Derek, you've been taking a lot of time off lately." Bernard's tone carried an edge that Derek had been noticing more frequently. "This is the first day I've requested off in 3 months, and before that, it was 6 months ago when Emma had the flu." Bernard leaned back in his leather chair, his small eyes narrowing. "Look, family is important, but so is this business. The Morrison project alone is worth $2 million to us. I trained Wilson on the inspection protocols specifically for situations like this," Derek replied, referring to Bernard's 25-year-old nephew, who'd been hired 6 months ago despite having no construction experience beyond a business degree. "Wilson isn't you, Derek. He doesn't have your expertise." The way Bernard said it made Derek's jaw clench. "Then maybe you shouldn't have put someone unqualified in a position where they need to handle multi-million-dollar inspections." The room went silent. Bernard's face flushed red, and Derek could see the vein in his temple pulsing, a warning sign Derek had learned to recognize over the years. "You know what, Derek? Take your day. Take all the days you want." Bernard's voice was dangerously quiet. "But when you come back, we're going to have a serious conversation about your attitude and your priorities." Derek left without another word, his mind focused on getting to Emma. As he drove home through the familiar streets of their suburban neighborhood, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted in that office. At home, he found Kendra pacing in the kitchen, still in her scrubs from the morning shift she'd rushed home from. Emma lay on the couch, flushed and listless, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "The doctor can see her at 2, Kendra said, relief evident in her voice when she saw Derek. "Thank God you could get away." Derek knelt beside Emma, placing a gentle hand on her forehead. Her skin was burning up. "Hey, princess, Daddy's here now." Emma's eyes fluttered open, and she managed a weak smile. "I don't feel good, Daddy." "I know, sweetheart. We're going to get you all better." As they waited in the pediatrician's office later that afternoon, Derek's phone remained mercifully silent. No calls from the office, no urgent texts about the Morrison inspection. Maybe Bernard was handling things professionally after all. Dr. Martinez, their longtime pediatrician, diagnosed Emma with a severe case of strep throat and prescribed antibiotics. She should start feeling better within 24 hours, he assured them. But keep her hydrated and let her rest. That evening, as Emma slept peacefully in her bed, antibiotics already working their magic, Derek and Kendra sat on their back porch. The weight of the day's confrontation with Bernard settled on Derek's shoulders like a familiar burden. "You did the right thing," Kendra said, as if reading his thoughts. "Emma needed you today." Derek nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow's return to the office. In his military days, he learned to trust his instincts, and right now, every instinct was telling him that Bernard Stevens was planning something. The question was, what was Derek going to do about it? Chapter 2, Priorities Straight. Derek arrived at the office the next morning to find his key card deactivated. The security guard, Mike Bird, an older man who'd worked the front desk for 8 years, looked uncomfortable as he buzzed Derek in. "Sorry about that, Mr. Harvey." Mr. Stevens said there was some kind of system glitch with your access, Mike said, though his eyes suggested he knew better. Derek made his way to his office, noting the subtle changes immediately. His project files had been moved. His computer showed signs of someone else accessing it. When he tried to log into the company system, his credentials had been changed. "Derek Harvey." Bernard's voice carried across the office floor with artificial authority. "My office." Now, the walk to Bernard's corner office felt different this time. Conversations stopped as Derek passed, and he could feel the eyes of his colleagues, people he'd worked alongside for years, watching with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. Bernard sat behind his desk with Wilson Stevens beside him, the young man's smug expression immediately putting Derek on alert. Wilson was tall and lean, with the kind of entitled arrogance that came from never earning anything. His expensive clothes and casual demeanor stood in stark contrast to the serious atmosphere of the meeting. "Have a seat, Derek," Bernard said, not looking up from folder on his desk. "I'll stand." Bernard finally raised his eyes, and Derek saw something cold there that hadn't been present in their previous interactions. "Yesterday's display of insubordination has forced me to make some difficult decisions." Insubordination. Derek's voice remained level, though his military training was kicking in. Assess the threat, identify exits, prepare for confrontation. "You prioritize your personal life over the company's needs. You question my business decisions. You undermine my nephew's position." Bernard ticked off each point on his fingers. "Frankly, Derek, you need to get your priorities straight." Wilson shifted in his chair, unable to hide his anticipation. "I took a day off to care for my sick daughter," Derek said slowly. "That's not insubordination. That's being a father. And that attitude is exactly the problem." Bernard stood up, pacing to the window, overlooking the construction yard below. "This company doesn't run on feelings, Derek. It runs on commitment, on putting the business first. I've put this business first for 15 years. I've saved you millions in lawsuits, prevented regulatory disasters, and built relationships with every major contractor in the city. My record speaks for itself. Your record is exactly why this is so disappointing." Bernard turned back to face him. "You are one of my most valued employees. But valued employees don't abandon critical inspections to play nursemaid." The word nursemaid hit Derek like a physical blow, and he saw Wilson smirk at his uncle's choice of words. "That's my daughter you're talking about," Derek said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet that anyone who'd served with him would recognize as a warning. "And this is my company," Bernard replied. "Which brings me to my decision. I'm letting you go, Derek. Effective immediately." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Derek felt something cold settle in his chest, not shock, but a familiar calm that had served him well in combat situations. "After 15 years, you're firing me for taking one day to care for my sick child?" "I'm restructuring the department," Bernard said with bureaucratic efficiency. "Wilson will be taking over your responsibilities. He has fresh ideas and isn't burdened by old-fashioned thinking." Derek looked at Wilson, who was now openly grinning. The kid couldn't hide his triumph, and Derek filed that arrogance away for future reference. "Wilson has no construction experience. He doesn't understand regulatory compliance, safety protocols, or project management. He'll learn," Bernard said dismissively. "Sometimes it's better to train someone from scratch than to work with someone whose priorities are confused." "My priorities are perfectly clear," Derek said, standing straighter. "Family first, integrity second, everything else falls in line after that." "Well, Those priorities just cost you your job. Bernard opened a manila folder and slid papers across the desk. Severance package is standard, 2 weeks' pay. Sign these, and we can part ways amicably. Derek didn't touch the papers. Instead, he studied Bernard's face, noting the satisfied expression that the man wasn't quite managing to hide. This wasn't just about yesterday's confrontation. This was planned. How long have you been planning this? Derek asked. What do you mean? The key card was already deactivated when I arrived. My computer access was changed overnight. These papers were prepared before our conversation. Derek's analytical mind was processing the timeline. You decided to fire me yesterday, didn't you? Bernard's silence was answer enough. You used my daughter's illness as an excuse to get rid of me, so you could give my job to your nephew. Derek's voice was steady, but there was steel in it now. 15 years of loyalty, and you replaced me with a kid who couldn't manage a lemonade stand. Wilson is highly qualified, Bernard said defensively. Wilson is your brother's son who needs a job. Derek looked directly at Wilson. Tell me, Wilson, what's the standard concrete curing time for a foundation pour in temperatures below 40 degrees? Wilson's confident expression faltered. That depends on various factors. 28 days minimum with proper additives, Derek said. Basic knowledge for anyone in construction management. What's the OSHA requirement for fall protection on structures above 6 feet? Derek, this isn't necessary, Bernard interrupted. Personal fall arrest systems, Derek continued, ignoring Bernard. Required for any work at heights over 6 feet. Wilson, what's the penalty for a safety violation that results in serious injury? Wilson was sweating now. Uncle Bernie, do I really need to? Up to $70,000 per violation, possible criminal charges for willful negligence, and immediate project shutdown. Derek turned back to Bernard. That's who you're trusting with multi-million-dollar projects. Enough. Bernard's face was red with anger and embarrassment. You're done here, Derek. Security will escort you out. As if summoned, 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Derek recognized them both. Men he'd worked with for years, who now looked deeply uncomfortable with their assignment. That won't be necessary, Derek said. I'll clear out my desk and leave quietly. As Derek walked back to his office, his mind was already working. Bernard had made this personal the moment he used Emma's illness as a weapon. The man had underestimated who he was dealing with, and that mistake would prove costly. Derek packed his personal items while his former colleagues watched in uncomfortable silence. 15 years of relationships, contacts, and trust couldn't be packed into a cardboard box, but Bernard Stevens was about to learn that lesson the hard way. As Derek walked toward the exit, he paused at Mike Bird's security desk. Mike, you've been here a long time. You've seen how this company really operates. Mike nodded cautiously. Yes, sir, Mr. Harvey. Remember that, Derek said quietly. When things start falling apart around here, remember what you've seen. Outside in the parking lot, Derek sat in his truck and pulled out his phone. He had one call to make, a call that would set everything in motion. His finger hovered over the contact for a moment, then pressed dial. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Colonel Martinez, DEA Financial Crimes Unit. Colonel, this is Derek Harvey. I need to cash in a favor. Chapter 3, One Call. Derek drove slowly through the city streets, his mind processing the conversation with Colonel Martinez. Ramon Martinez had served alongside Derek in Afghanistan, where their engineering unit had uncovered a sophisticated money laundering operation run by local contractors. Derek's methodical investigation work had earned Martinez a promotion and a transfer to the DEA's Financial Crimes Division. I remember Stevens and Associates, Martinez had said during their call. Didn't they have some issues with federal contracts a few years back? Allegations of overcharging on Army Corps projects, Derek confirmed. I was the one who flagged the discrepancies and helped clean house, save the company from federal prosecution. And now they fired you for taking care of your sick daughter. Martinez's voice had carried the disgust of a fellow father. What exactly are you thinking, Derek? I'm thinking Bernard Stevens has been very careful to hide his current activities from me, but maybe not careful enough. Now, sitting in his truck outside Kendra's clinic, Derek reviewed what he knew. Over the past 2 years, Stevens and Associates have been aggressively underbidding on municipal contracts, jobs they shouldn't have been able to win with their margins. Wilson's sudden hiring and placement in a critical position wasn't nepotism. It was strategic positioning for someone Bernard could control completely. Kendra emerged from the clinic at 6 p.m., exhaustion evident in her posture. She slid into the passenger seat and immediately noticed Derek's expression. "You got fired, didn't you?" she said softly. Derek nodded, then told her everything about the morning's confrontation. Kendra listened without interruption, her nursing background having taught her to absorb information before reacting. "So what's your plan?" she asked when he finished. "Plan? Derek Harvey, I've been married to you for 12 years. You have that look, the same one you had when you figured out that contractor was stealing supplies from the base in Afghanistan. You're not just angry, you're calculating." Derek smiled despite himself. Kendra knew him too well. "Bernard made 2 mistakes," Derek said. "First, he assumed I was just another corporate employee he could discard. Second, he put Wilson in charge of information I used to protect this company from scrutiny." "What kind of scrutiny?" "The kind that involves federal agencies and criminal investigations." That evening, after Emma had eaten dinner and was feeling well enough to color at the kitchen table, Derek set up his laptop and began working. His 15 years at Stevens and Associates hadn't just been about managing construction projects. They'd been about learning every aspect of the company's operations. Derek had access to industry databases that tracked bidding patterns, subcontractor relationships, and material costs. Within 2 hours, he'd identified several anomalies in Stevens and Associates' recent contracts that painted a concerning picture. The company was consistently underbidding by margins that should have resulted in significant losses, yet their quarterly reports showed steady profits. Their primary concrete supplier, Consolidated Materials, had no business license on record and was owned by a shell company registered in Delaware. Most damning, several of their recent municipal projects had used subcontractors with connections to known organized crime figures. Information Derek had previously flagged and been told to let sleeping dogs lie. Derek's phone rang at 9 p.m. The caller ID showed Bernard Stevens. "Derek, we need to talk." Bernard's voice was different now. Less arrogant, more urgent. "I think we said everything that needed to be said this morning. Look, maybe I was hasty. You caught me on a bad day, and I overreacted. Come in tomorrow, and we can discuss reinstating your position." Derek almost smiled. Martinez had worked quickly. "What changed your mind, Bernard?" I've been thinking about your contributions to the company. Maybe we can work something out. Does this have anything to do with the phone calls you started receiving this afternoon?" The silence on the other end was telling. "I don't know what you mean," Bernard finally said. "Bernard, I've known you for 15 years. I can hear the panic in your voice. What exactly has you so worried?" "Nothing. Just think about my offer, okay? Come in tomorrow morning." Derek ended the call and looked at Kendra, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway. "That was fast," she said. "Faster than I expected." Derek's phone buzzed with a text message. "Martinez works with very motivated people." The text was from an unknown number. "Package delivered. Target received 33 calls in 6 hours. All agencies now aware. Recommend maintaining distance. RM. 33 calls. From federal agencies, state regulators, municipal oversight committees, and probably a few criminal investigators." Derek had spent 15 years protecting Bernard Stevens from exactly this kind of scrutiny, and now the protection was gone. Emma looked up from her coloring book. "Daddy, why do you look happy but angry at the same time?" Derek went to his daughter and knelt beside her chair. "Sometimes, Princess, bad people do bad things and think they won't get caught. But eventually, the truth comes out." "Is that good?" "That's very good." Later that night, after Emma was asleep and Kendra was reading in bed, Derek stood on their back porch looking up at the stars. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from Bernard, Wilson, and several numbers he didn't recognize. He let them all go to voicemail. Tomorrow would bring consequences for Bernard Stevens that the man couldn't imagine. Derek had spent his military career learning that the most effective attacks came for directions your enemy never anticipated. Bernard had expected Derek to quietly accept his termination, maybe file a wrongful termination suit, perhaps badmouth the company to a few industry contacts. Bernard Stevens had no idea that Derek Harvey had friends in federal law enforcement who specialized in construction industry fraud. He didn't know that Derek had been carefully documenting questionable activities for years, creating a paper trail that would make any prosecutor's job easy. Most importantly, Bernard didn't understand that Derek's military background had taught him patience, strategic thinking, and the importance of total victory over half measures. As Derek turned to go inside, his phone rang one more time. The caller ID showed Wilson Stevens. Derek answered. "Please." Wilson's voice was shaking. "You have to call off whatever you did. Uncle Bernie is going crazy. People are showing up at the office with badges and briefcases. I don't know what's happening." "Wilson, let me give you some advice," Derek said calmly. "When federal investigators ask you questions, tell them the truth. Don't lie to protect your uncle. He wouldn't protect you. I don't understand any of this. I just graduated college 6 months ago. Then you should have stayed at your entry-level job instead of taking a position you weren't qualified for." Derek's voice carried no sympathy. "Actions have consequences, Wilson. You and your uncle are about to learn that lesson." Derek hung up and went inside, where Kendra was waiting at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee. "How bad is it going to get?" she asked. Derek considered the question seriously. "For Bernard and Wilson? Very bad. They've been playing games with federal contracts and municipal funds while using connections to organize crime figures. When the investigators finish connecting the dots, could you get in trouble? You worked there for 15 years. I documented every concern I had and was consistently overruled. Martinez has copies of reports I filed that were ignored or buried. If anything, I'll be considered a key witness who tried to keep the company clean." Kendra reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For not becoming like them. 15 years in that environment, and you never compromised your integrity." Derek squeezed her hand. "Emma needs to see that doing the right thing matters, even when it costs you something." As they headed upstairs to bed, Derek felt a sense of completion he hadn't experienced since his military service. Tomorrow would bring chaos for Bernard Stevens, but for Derek Harvey, it would bring justice. The war was just beginning. Chapter 4: Cascading Failures. Derek woke at 5:30 a.m. to his phone buzzing incessantly. 17 missed calls from Bernard, 9 from Wilson, and 6 from numbers he didn't recognize. The voicemail box was full. He made coffee and sat at his kitchen table, listening to the messages on speaker while Kendra got Emma ready for school. The progression from angry demands to desperate pleading painted a clear picture of Bernard's deteriorating situation. "Derek, call me back immediately. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but it stops now." That was from 10 p.m. the previous night. By midnight, "Look, we can work this out. Whatever you want, your job back, a raise, more vacation time. Just make these calls stop." The 3 a.m. message was different. "They froze our operating accounts. How the hell did you manage that? Call me." Derek deleted the messages and checked the local news website. Nothing yet, but that would change soon. Federal financial investigations moved slowly until they didn't, and when they accelerated, the results were spectacular. Emma bounded into the kitchen, fully recovered from her illness and excited about returning to school. "Daddy, are you taking me today?" "Absolutely, princess." Derek realized this was the first morning in 15 years he didn't have to rush to Stevens and Associates. The freedom felt strange and liberating. After dropping Emma at school, Derek drove to downtown, parking across from Stevens and Associates. The construction company occupied a 4-story building that Bernard owned outright, or had, until federal investigators discovered the building's mortgage was being paid through questionable financial arrangements. Derek didn't have to wait long. At 8:15 a.m., 3 black SUVs pulled up to the building entrance. Men and women in business suits, carrying briefcases and federal identification, entered the building. Derek recognized the pattern from his military days, a coordinated multi-agency operation. His phone rang. "Derek, it's Ramon Martinez. Thought you'd want to know. IRS criminal investigation, FBI financial crimes, and our DEA unit hit Stevens and Associates this morning with simultaneous search warrants. That was fast work. Your documentation made it easy. Turns out Stevens has been running a sophisticated money laundering operation using federal construction contracts as cover. The concrete supplier you flagged? Front company for a drug trafficking organization. Those underbid municipal projects? Funded with dirty money to maintain the appearance of legitimate business while laundering drug proceeds. Derek felt vindicated, but not surprised. What about Wilson? Kids claiming ignorance, and he might be telling the truth. Problem is, he signed off on documents as project manager that he clearly didn't understand. Conspiracy charges don't require intent if you're in a position of responsibility. Through his windshield, Derek watched Wilson Stevens being led from the building in handcuffs. The young man looked terrified and confused, his expensive clothes wrinkled from what had obviously been a sleepless night. Bernard, flight risk assessment pending. He tried to access offshore accounts this morning, which triggered additional charges. Martinez paused. Derek, you need to know. Your name came up in their financial records. Frequently. What do you mean? Stevens has been forging your signature on documents for at least 2 years. Project approvals, safety certifications, even regulatory filings. If you hadn't been fired yesterday, you'd probably be in handcuffs too. Derek felt cold understanding wash over him. He was setting me up to take the fall. That's our assessment. Wilson was supposed to be the incompetent frontman. You were the experienced scapegoat, and Bernard would disappear when the investigation got close. Martinez's voice carried professional admiration. Good thing you called when you did. Derek watched more federal agents entering the building, carrying boxes of evidence. What happens now? Federal prosecutor will want to interview you. Your documentation shows a clear pattern of you trying to prevent these activities, so you're a witness, not a suspect. Could be a long process, though. After ending the call, Derek drove to his neighborhood coffee shop and found a corner table. For the first time in months, he opened his laptop not for work, but for personal planning. With his severance and Kendra's nursing income, they could manage for several months while he decided his next move. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Harvey, this is Sean Platt, reporter for the Herald. Could we discuss Stevens and Associates? Derek deleted the text without responding. Then another. Derek Harvey, Channel 7 News. Available for comment on federal raid. Word was spreading fast. His phone rang, showing Kendra's number. Are you seeing the news? She asked immediately. What news? It's on every channel. Major construction company raided in federal investigation. They're showing footage of people being arrested outside your old office. Derek smiled grimly. Bernard Stevens is learning that actions have consequences. The reporters are saying this involves drug money and organized crime. Derek, you worked there for 15 years. Are we going to be okay? We're going to be fine. Better than fine. Derek could hear the relief in his own voice. Kendra, I spent years trying to keep that company clean, documenting problems, and being told to look the other way. If I hadn't been fired yesterday, I'd be facing criminal charges right now. You think Bernard planned to blame you? I know he did, and he almost got away with it. Derek spent the rest of the morning at the coffee shop, watching news coverage and fielding calls from former colleagues. The story was developing rapidly. Bernard Stevens arrested on federal racketeering charges. Wilson Stevens charged with conspiracy and fraud, company assets frozen, multiple ongoing investigations into municipal contract irregularities. At noon, his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Harvey? This is Joel Cole, special agent with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to schedule an interview regarding your employment at Stevens and Associates. Of course. When and where? Today would be preferable, if you're available. Federal Building, downtown, 2 p.m. Derek agreed and spent the drive downtown thinking about the questions they'd ask. His military training had taught him to be precise and factual when dealing with investigators. Provide what they need, avoid speculation, stick to documented facts. The FBI interview lasted 3 hours. Special Agent Cole and his partner, a DEA agent named Michael Kaufman, methodically walked through Derek's 15-year employment history. Derek provided copies of reports he'd filed, emails documenting concerns, and detailed explanations of questionable activities he'd observed. Mr. Harvey, Your documentation is exceptionally thorough, Agent Cole noted. Most employees in your position don't maintain this level of detail. Military habit, Derek replied. Document everything, report up the chain, maintain paper trails. Stevens apparently told several associates that you were his compliance officer, Agent Kaufman said. Did you consider yourself responsible for regulatory adherence? I considered myself responsible for doing my job correctly and reporting problems when I saw them. Bernard Stevens consistently overruled my recommendations and told me to focus on project management, not regulatory issues. The agents exchanged glances. Mr. Harvey, we found documents with your forged signature approving activities you've told us you opposed. How do you explain that? Derek had been expecting this question. Check the dates on those documents against my calendar. I bet most of them were signed when I was out of the office, vacation days, sick days, or business travel. Agent Cole made a note. We'll verify those timelines. Bernard Stevens has been planning to use me as a scapegoat for months, maybe years, Derek said. Firing me yesterday was probably panic. He realized the investigation was closing in and needed me gone before I could expose his plans. As Derek left the federal building, he felt lighter than he had in years. The investigators clearly viewed him as a key witness, not a suspect. His meticulous documentation had protected him from becoming Bernard's fall guy. His phone had accumulated 17 more messages during the interview. News reporters, former colleagues, even a few former clients wanting to know what had happened. Derek deleted them all except one from Mike Bird, the security guard. Mr. Harvey, you told me to remember what I've seen. Well, I've been talking to federal investigators all day, and I remember everything. Thank you for the warning. Derek smiled as he drove home. Bernard Stevens had built his criminal operation assuming that everyone around him was either corrupt or controllable. He'd underestimated the integrity of his employees and the memory of those who'd witnessed his activities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Derek Harvey could sleep peacefully knowing that justice was finally catching up with Bernard Stevens. Chapter 5, Network Effects. 2 weeks after the federal raid, Derek sat in his home office reviewing job offers. Word had spread quickly through the construction industry that Derek Harvey was the whistleblower who'd brought down Stevens and Associates, and the response was overwhelming. 7 major construction companies had reached out, impressed by his integrity and detailed knowledge of regulatory compliance. The most interesting offer came from Raymond McFarland, president of McFarland Construction, the largest competitor to Stevens and Associates. McFarland wanted to meet personally, suggesting an executive-level position overseeing all regulatory and compliance operations across their multi-state operation. Derek's phone rang, interrupting his review. The caller ID showed his attorney, Isaac Zhang, whom he'd retained to handle the inevitable legal complexities. Derek, we need to talk. Isaac's voice carried unusual excitement. I just got off the phone with the federal prosecutor. They want you as their star witness in the Stevens case. What does that mean? It means Bernard Stevens is facing serious prison time, and your testimony is crucial to their case. They're offering witness protection if needed, but more importantly, they want to discuss a reward. Derek frowned. What kind of reward? Federal Whistleblower Protection Act allows for significant financial compensation when someone exposes major fraud involving federal contracts. We're talking about potentially millions of dollars in recovered funds. Derek had never considered financial gain from exposing Bernard's crimes. Justice had been motivation enough. There's more, Isaac continued. Stevens and Associates is being dissolved, and their assets are being liquidated. Several clients are looking for a new construction company to complete their projects. If you were to start your own company, the implications hit Derek immediately. Bernard Stevens had spent years building a client base and reputation that Derek had helped maintain through his competent project management. Now that reputation was destroyed, but the client's needs remained. I need significant capital to start a construction company. Which brings me to the other call I received today. Kendra Morgan wants to speak with you. Derek was confused for a moment, then realized Isaac meant Kendra's uncle, Wilson Lester, a successful businessman who'd built a chain of automotive dealerships across 3 states. Wilson wants to discuss a business partnership. Apparently, He's been looking for investment opportunities in construction. After ending the call, Derek sat back in his chair, mind racing. The possibility of starting his own construction company had never seriously occurred to him, but the opportunity was presenting itself organically. His phone buzzed with another call, this one from Special Agent Cole. "Mr. Harvey, we've completed our analysis of the forged documents. You were correct. Every signature was dated when you were documented to be out of the office. Stevens had been systematically forging your approval for illegal activities for over 18 months. How bad is the situation? RICO charges, money laundering, conspiracy, fraud, and now document forgery. He's looking at 25 to life if convicted. His attorney is pushing for a plea bargain." Derek felt satisfaction mixed with sadness. Bernard had brought this on himself, but the destruction was comprehensive. What about Wilson? Different story. Kid was genuinely ignorant of most activities, but he did sign documents he didn't understand while in a position of authority. Prosecutor is offering a plea deal, probation and restitution in exchange for full cooperation. That afternoon, Derek drove to McFarland Construction for his meeting with Raymond McFarland. The company's headquarters impressed him. Modern, efficient, with photographs of major projects lining the hallways. McFarland himself was a man in his early 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the bearing of someone who'd built his success through competence rather than connections. Derek Harvey, McFarland stood to shake hands. The man who brought down Bernard Stevens. The man who reported criminal activity, Derek corrected. McFarland smiled approvingly. Exactly the kind of precision I need. Let me be direct. I want to hire you as my chief compliance officer. Full authority over all regulatory matters. Direct report to me, salary and benefits that reflect the importance of the position. The offer was generous, significantly more than Derek had been making at Stevens and Associates, with equity participation and full authority to implement compliance programs across all company operations. "I'm flattered by the offer," Derek said, "but I need to ask, why is compliance so important to you?" McFarland walked to his window, looking out at the construction yard below. 20 years ago, I made some mistakes. Cut corners on safety, overlooked some regulatory requirements, trusted the wrong subcontractors. Nobody was hurt, and we didn't break any laws, but we came close. Too close. He turned back to Derek. "I learned that reputation and integrity are the most valuable assets a company can have. Bernard Stevens forgot that lesson, if he ever learned it at all." Derek appreciated the honesty. "I need to consider all my options. I've been approached about starting my own company. I respect that. Take your time." McFarland returned to his desk. "But consider this. Building a company from scratch means years of development, significant risk, and no guarantee of success. Working here means immediate impact, established relationships, and resources to make real changes in the industry." Driving home, Derek's phone rang with yet another call from a reporter, this one from a national business publication wanting to discuss corporate whistleblowing. Derek let it go to voicemail, along with the 6 other media calls he'd received that day. The attention was becoming overwhelming. Derek Harvey, the construction manager, had lived a quiet, private life. Derek Harvey, the federal witness, was becoming a public figure, and he wasn't comfortable with the transition. At home, he found Kendra in the kitchen with Emma, helping with homework while dinner cooked on the stove. The domestic scene felt like a sanctuary from the chaos surrounding the Stevens case. "Uncle Wilson called," Kendra said. "He wants to have dinner tomorrow night to discuss a business opportunity. Your uncle moves fast. He's been successful because he recognizes opportunities and acts quickly. The question is whether you're ready for that kind of change." Derek looked at Emma, focused intently on her math homework. His daughter's future will be shaped by decisions he made now. The safe choice would be accepting McFarland's offer, guaranteed income, established company, minimal risk. The bold choice would be starting his own company, with all the uncertainty and potential that entailed. "Daddy," Emma looked up from her homework. "What's a whistleblower?" Derek glanced at Kendra, who shrugged. Obviously, Emma had overheard conversations or seen news reports. "A whistleblower is someone who sees something wrong and reports it to the people who can fix it," Derek said. Like telling the teacher when someone is cheating? Exactly like that. Emma considered this. But what if the person who's cheating gets mad at you? Derek knelt beside his daughter's chair. Sometimes doing the right thing makes people angry, but you still have to do it because telling the truth is more important than keeping people happy. Are you a whistleblower, Daddy? Yes, Princess. I am. Emma nodded seriously, then returned to her homework. For her, the moral equation was simple. See something wrong, report it, accept the consequences. Derek envied her clarity. That evening, after Emma was in bed, Derek and Kendra sat at their kitchen table with coffee and a yellow legal pad, listing pros and cons of his various options. The conversation went late into the night, covering practical concerns, financial projections, and long-term goals. What do you want to do? Kendra asked finally. Derek looked at the legal pad covered with their analysis, then set it aside. I want to build something, not just work for someone else's vision, but create something that reflects our values. Kendra smiled. Then we start a company. As Derek turned off the lights and headed upstairs, he felt the same sense of purpose he'd experienced during his military service. Bernard Stevens had given him an unexpected gift, the opportunity to start fresh, build something better, and prove that integrity was not just idealistic but practical. The war with Bernard Stevens was won. Tomorrow, Derek Harvey would begin building his own empire. Chapter 6: Foundations. The meeting with Wilson Lester took place in an upscale steakhouse downtown, where Derek learned that Kendra's uncle was more than just a successful car dealer. Wilson owned 3 dealerships, had investment partnerships in 2 construction companies in neighboring states, and maintained relationships with banks and bonding companies that could provide the financial backing necessary for major construction projects. Derek, I've been following the Stevens case, Wilson said over dinner. What impressed me wasn't just that you exposed the corruption, but how methodically you documented everything. That's the kind of attention to detail I look for in business partners. Business partners? Wilson smiled. I'm proposing a full partnership. I provide the capital and financial connections. You provide the expertise and industry relationships. We split ownership 50-50, with you handling all operational decisions and me focusing on the business development side. Derek had expected an investment offer, not a partnership proposal. That's extremely generous. It's also extremely smart. The construction industry needs companies that can be trusted, and right now, your name is synonymous with integrity. That reputation is worth more than any amount of startup capital. Over the next 2 hours, Wilson laid out a comprehensive business plan. Start with smaller municipal contracts to establish the new company's reputation, then expand to larger commercial projects. Focus on regulatory compliance as a competitive advantage, using Derek's expertise to win contracts from clients who wanted to avoid the risks associated with less scrupulous contractors. What would you call the company? Wilson asked. Derek had been thinking about this question since their phone conversation. Harvey and Associates. Simple, professional, and it puts the emphasis on competence rather than flashy marketing. Harvey and Associates, Wilson repeated, testing the sound. I like it. Clean, trustworthy, memorable. The legal paperwork moved quickly. Isaac Zhang handled the incorporation, licensing, and insurance requirements while Wilson arranged for business accounts, bonding, and credit lines. Within 3 weeks of their dinner meeting, Harvey and Associates existed as a legal entity with the financial backing to bid on substantial projects. Derek's first hire was Mike Bird, the former Stevens and Associates security guard who provided crucial testimony to federal investigators. Mike's background included 10 years as a municipal building inspector before joining Stevens, making him perfect for Harvey and Associates' focus on regulatory compliance. I never thought I'd work construction again after what happened at Stevens, Mike said during his interview. But working for someone with your reputation would be an honor. Derek's second hire surprised everyone, including himself. Wilson Stevens called 3 weeks after his plea agreement was finalized. Mr. Harvey, I know this is probably crazy, but I want to ask if you consider hiring me. Derek's initial reaction was immediate refusal, but something in Wilson's voice made him pause. Explain. I learned more about construction in the past month dealing with federal investigators than I learned in 6 months working for my uncle. I realize how completely unprepared I was for that position and how much damage my ignorance could have caused. Wilson's voice carried genuine humility. I'm not asking for a management position or special treatment. I want to start at the bottom, learn the business properly, and maybe eventually earn a position based on competence instead of family connections. Derek considered the request. Wilson's testimony had been crucial in securing Bernard's conviction, and the young man was facing significant restitution payments that would take years to satisfy. Entry-level position, standard pay, no special considerations based on your family name or previous employment, Derek said finally. Yes, sir. Absolutely. You'll be working directly under Mike Bird, learning regulatory compliance and project management fundamentals. Any problems with authority, any indication you're not taking this seriously, and you're gone immediately. Understood, Mr. Harvey. Thank you for the chance. Harvey and Associates' first contract came through an unexpected source. Alma Singh, the city's director of municipal projects, called Derek directly. Mr. Harvey, we have a situation. The Parks Department awarded a contract for 3 new playground installations to Stevens and Associates before the federal investigation. Obviously, that contract is void, but the playgrounds need to be completed before summer. Derek reviewed the project specifications that afternoon. 3 elementary school playgrounds, total budget of $180,000, completion deadline of May 15th. The profit margins were slim, but the project would establish Harvey and Associates' reputation with the city. We can do it, Derek told Alma Singh. On time, on budget, and with full regulatory compliance. I was hoping you'd say that. The contract is yours. Derek's first project meeting with his small team, Mike Bird, Wilson Stevens, and 2 experienced construction workers he'd hired, took place in Harvey and Associates' office, a converted garage behind Derek's house. The informality of the setting contrasted sharply with Stevens and Associates' corporate headquarters, but Derek preferred the personal touch. This project is about more than building playgrounds, Derek told his team. Every detail of our work will be scrutinized, photographed, and discussed. We need to be perfect. Wilson raised his hand tentatively. Mr. Harvey, what if we encounter problems? Unexpected conditions, supplier delays, weather issues. Derek smiled, recognizing the question as evidence that Wilson was actually thinking about project management challenges. We plan for contingencies, communicate proactively with the client, and solve problems before they become crises. That's how you build a reputation. The playground project went flawlessly. Derek's meticulous planning anticipated every potential issue, from soil conditions to equipment delivery schedules. Wilson Stevens proved to be a dedicated worker, arriving early and staying late, asking thoughtful questions and taking detailed notes. Mike Bird's regulatory expertise ensured every inspection was passed on the first attempt. Most importantly, Derek insisted on exceeding the contract specifications wherever possible. Higher quality materials, additional safety features, enhanced accessibility options, all provided at no extra cost to demonstrate Harvey and Associates' commitment to excellence. The project completed 2 days ahead of schedule and $3,000 under budget. Derek returned the surplus to the city, a gesture that generated significant positive attention in both city government and local media. Harvey and Associates delivers excellence on first municipal project, read the headline in the local business journal. The article detailed Derek's background, the formation of his company, and his commitment to ethical business practices. More importantly, the article caught the attention of other potential clients. Derek's phone began ringing with inquiries about larger projects, office buildings, retail developments, industrial facilities. Each caller mentioned hearing about Harvey and Associates through word-of-mouth recommendations or media coverage. 3 months after incorporating, Harvey and Associates had completed 4 projects, employed 12 people, and maintained a waiting list of potential contracts. Derek's reputation for integrity, combined with Wilson Lester's business development skills, had created demand that exceeded their current capacity. The success felt surreal to Derek, who remembered the despair of being fired for caring for his daughter. Now, that same concern for family and values was driving his company's growth. Clients specifically sought out Harvey and Associates because they wanted to work with someone they could trust. The most satisfying moment came when Special Agent Cole called with an update on Bernard Stevens' case. Plea bargain fell through, Cole reported. Stevens refused to accept responsibility for the full scope of his activities. Case is going to trial, and your testimony will be crucial. Derek felt ready for the challenge. When do we start? Jury selection begins next month. Are you prepared for the media attention this will generate? Derek looked around his home office, where framed certificates for completed projects were starting to cover the walls. His new life was built on the foundation of truth and integrity that Bernard Stevens had tried to destroy. I'm prepared for whatever comes next. Chapter 7. The Trial of Truth. The federal courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when Derek arrived for the first day of Bernard Stevens' trial. 6 months had passed since the original charges were filed, and media interest had intensified rather than faded. The case had become a symbol of corporate corruption and the importance of whistleblower protection. Derek wore his best suit, navy blue, conservative, professional, and carried a leather briefcase containing copies of every document he'd ever filed at Stevens & Associates. His testimony would be supported by 15 years of meticulous records. Inside the courthouse, Derek got his first look at Bernard Stevens in months. The man had aged dramatically. His hair had gone completely gray, he'd lost significant weight, and his expensive suit couldn't hide the defeated slump of his shoulders. Bernard's eyes found Derek across the courtroom, and for a moment, pure hatred flashed between them. Wilson Stevens sat in the gallery with his parents, looking young and nervous. Since joining Harvey and Associates, Wilson had proven himself to be a dedicated employee and valuable team member. The experience of nearly facing federal prosecution had transformed him from an entitled young man into someone who understood the value of honest work. The federal prosecutor, Amanda Todd, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a reputation for thorough preparation and aggressive cross-examination. During their pre-trial meetings, she'd been impressed by Derek's documentation and his ability to explain complex financial arrangements in clear, understandable terms. Mr. Harvey, she'd told him, your testimony will make or break this case. Stevens' defense team is going to try to paint you as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. We need the jury to see you as someone who tried repeatedly to prevent these crimes. Bernard's defense attorney, Jared Morse, was equally formidable, expensive, experienced, and known for aggressive tactics that put prosecution witnesses on trial instead of his clients. Derek had been warned to expect personal attacks on his character, motives, and credibility. The trial's opening statements set the tone. Prosecutor Todd laid out a systematic pattern of money laundering, fraud, and racketeering that had operated for years under Bernard Stevens' direction. She described how legitimate construction projects had been used to launder drug money, how federal contracts had been manipulated through fraud, and how Bernard had attempted to frame Derek Harvey as a scapegoat when the investigation closed in. Defense attorney Morse presented a different narrative. Bernard Stevens was a successful businessman who'd been betrayed by a vindictive employee. Derek Harvey had orchestrated the entire scandal to destroy his former boss after being fired for poor performance. The alleged crimes were either misunderstandings or the result of unauthorized actions by subordinates, including Derek himself. Derek's testimony began on the third day of the trial. Prosecutor Todd walked him through his background: military service, engineering education, 15 years of employment at Stevens & Associates, his role in preventing previous regulatory problems. Mr. Harvey, did you ever observe activities at Stevens & Associates that concerned you? Todd asked. Yes. Beginning approximately 3 years ago, I noticed irregularities in our bidding processes, unusual subcontractor relationships, and financial arrangements that didn't seem consistent with legitimate business practices. What did you do about these concerns? Derek pulled out a thick folder. I documented everything and reported my concerns to Mr. Stevens multiple times. These are copies of memos, emails, and formal reports I filed between 2022 and 2024. Todd introduced the documents as evidence, and Derek spent the next 2 hours explaining specific instances where he'd identified problems and recommended corrective action. In each case, Bernard had overruled his recommendations or told him to focus on project management rather than regulatory compliance. Mr. Harvey, why do you think Mr. Stevens consistently ignored your warnings? Objection. Defense attorney Morse interrupted. Calls for speculation. I'll rephrase, Todd said. Based on your observations, what was the pattern of Mr. Stevens' responses to your compliance concerns? He consistently prioritized short-term profits over legal compliance. When I warned about potential regulatory problems, he would dismiss them as unlikely or tell me that he would handle the political side of any issues that arose. Derek's testimony continued for 2 full days, with Prosecutor Todd methodically establishing how Derek had tried to prevent the very crimes Bernard was accused of committing. The documentation Derek provided painted a clear picture of someone trying to maintain ethical standards within an increasingly corrupt organization. Defense attorney Morse's cross-examination was brutal but predictable. He attacked Derek's motives, suggesting revenge for being fired. He questioned Derek's competence, implying that failures to prevent the crime showed either complicity or incompetence. He even suggested that Derek had forged some of the documents he'd presented as evidence. Mr. Harvey, isn't it true that you were terminated from Stevens and Associates for poor performance? Morse asked. I was terminated for taking a day off to care for my sick daughter, Derek replied calmly. According to your former employer, you were terminated for insubordination and failure to meet professional standards. My professional standards included refusing to approve activities I believed were illegal or unethical. If that constitutes insubordination, then yes, I was insubordinate. Morse pressed harder. You claim to have reported concerns to Mr. Stevens, but isn't it true that you never actually tried to stop any of the activities you now claim were criminal? Derek had been prepared for this question. I reported my concerns through proper channels and documented my recommendations. When Mr. Stevens overruled my recommendations, I continued to document the problems and maintain records that would protect the company if regulatory issues arose. So you participated in activities you claim were illegal? I performed my job duties as directed while maintaining detailed records of my concerns and recommendations. The alternative was to resign, which would have eliminated any possibility of documenting these activities or providing evidence to investigators. Morse's cross-examination continued for hours, but Derek's answers remained consistent and calm. His military training had taught him to stick to facts under pressure, and his documentation supported every claim he made. The trial's most dramatic moment came when Wilson Stevens testified for the prosecution. The young man described how his uncle had placed him in a position he wasn't qualified for, had him sign documents he didn't understand, and had explicitly told him to ignore any concerns raised by Derek Harvey. My uncle told me that Derek was old school and didn't understand modern business practices, Wilson testified. He said Derek was paranoid about regulations and that I shouldn't worry about his warnings. Bernard Stevens' face flushed red as his nephew described conversations that clearly established criminal intent and a deliberate effort to circumvent Derek's oversight. The prosecution's case concluded with testimony from federal investigators detailing the scope of the money laundering operation, the connections to organized crime figures, and the systematic nature of the fraud. Agent Cole testified that Derek's documentation had been crucial in understanding the criminal enterprise and identifying all participants. Bernard Stevens did not testify in his own defense, a decision that surprised many observers. His defense relied entirely on attacking the credibility of prosecution witnesses and arguing that any illegal activities were the unauthorized actions of subordinates. Closing arguments were passionate on both sides. Prosecutor Todd painted Bernard Stevens as a calculating criminal who had corrupted a legitimate business for personal gain while attempting to frame an honest employee. Defense attorney Morse portrayed Bernard as a successful businessman destroyed by a vengeful former employee's false accusations. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning with guilty verdicts on all counts: racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy, fraud, and document forgery. Bernard Stevens showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, but his wife broke down, crying in the gallery. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 months later, with Bernard facing a potential life sentence under federal guidelines. Outside the courthouse, Derek was surrounded by reporters asking for his reaction to the verdicts. "I'm satisfied that justice has been served," Derek said simply. This case was never about revenge. It was about accountability and the importance of maintaining integrity in business. "What's next for you, Mr. Harvey?" asked a reporter from the Business Journal. Derek smiled slightly. "I'm building a construction company based on the principles that got me into this situation in the first place: integrity, competence, and putting family first." As Derek walked to his truck, he felt the weight of the past year lifting from his shoulders. The trial was over, justice had been served, and his new life could finally begin without the shadow of Bernard Stevens hanging over it. The war was won, but the real victory was just beginning. Chapter 8: Empire Building. 6 months after Bernard Stevens' conviction, Derek stood in the conference room of Harvey and Associates' new headquarters, a renovated warehouse in the industrial district that housed their expanded operations. The walls displayed photographs of completed projects: office buildings, school renovations, municipal facilities, and retail developments. What started as a 3-person operation in Derek's garage had grown to 45 employees and a backlog of contracts extending into the next year. The morning meeting included department heads Derek had hired as the company grew: Stacy Lim, a former municipal engineer who headed their regulatory compliance department; Josh Randall, a project manager poached from a competitor who brought relationships with major clients; and Terrence Doherty, a financial controller with 20 years of experience in construction accounting. "Revenue projections for this quarter?" Derek asked. Terrence consulted his tablet. "We're tracking 20% above budget, with profit margins holding steady at 18%. The reputation for quality and reliability is allowing us to maintain premium pricing." Derek nodded, satisfied but not surprised. Harvey and Associates had built their business model on a simple premise: do excellent work, finish on time, maintain absolute integrity, and charge accordingly. Clients were willing to pay premium rates for contractors they could trust. "Any compliance issues?" Derek asked Stacy. "Clean across all projects. 3 surprise inspections last month, all passed without issues." The city inspector told Josh that our safety standards are the highest he's seen in 15 years. Derek's phone buzzed with a text from Wilson Lester. "Major opportunity. Can you meet at 2 p.m.? Personnel updates?" Derek asked Josh. "Wilson Stevens is requesting a promotion to assistant project manager. He's completed his construction management certification, and his supervisors consistently rate his work as excellent." Derek considered this carefully. Wilson had proved himself over the past 18 months, transforming from an entitled college graduate into a competent construction professional. More importantly, his testimony against his uncle had shown moral courage that Derek respected. "Promote him, but with conditions. He reports directly to you, and any major decisions require your approval. I want him to succeed, but he needs to earn additional responsibility gradually." The afternoon meeting with Wilson Lester took place at a downtown restaurant where the businessman had reserved a private dining room. Derek arrived to find Wilson already there with 2 other men: Sean Platt, a real estate developer Derek recognized from newspaper articles, and Mario Benson, whose name Derek couldn't place, but whose expensive suit and confident demeanor suggested significant wealth. "Derek, I want you to meet some potential partners," Wilson began. "Sean develops commercial properties across 3 states, and Mario has connections with institutional investors looking for construction industry opportunities." Sean Platt was a tall, lean man with prematurely gray hair and the focused intensity of someone accustomed to large-scale deals. "Mr. Harvey, your reputation in the industry has reached our attention. We're looking for construction partners who can handle major commercial developments while maintaining the highest quality standards. What kind of projects are you considering?" Derek asked. "Mixed-use developments, office complexes, retail centers. Projects in the $20 to $50 million range that require construction companies with significant bonding capacity and proven track records. Derek was intrigued but cautious. Harvey and Associates had grown rapidly, but they were still a mid-sized company. Projects of the scale Sean was describing would require substantial expansion and significant risk. Mario Benson leaned forward. "Mr. Harvey, I represent a consortium of investors who've been following your company's development. We're prepared to provide the capital necessary to expand Harvey and Associates into major commercial construction." What would that involve? Significant capital investment, expanded bonding capacity, additional equipment and personnel, and access to project financing that would allow you to bid on the largest commercial developments in the region. Wilson Lester smiled. "Derek, this is the opportunity to build Harvey and Associates into one of the dominant construction companies in the Southeast. The reputation you've built for integrity and quality would be the foundation for major growth." Derek listened to their presentations for the next 2 hours, asking detailed questions about financing terms, control structures, and growth projections. The opportunity was attractive, but it represented a fundamental change in Harvey and Associates' character. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your interest and the potential you're describing, but I need to understand something. Why Harvey and Associates? There are larger, more established construction companies you could partner with." Sean Platt answered immediately. "Because after the Stevens case, your name is synonymous with integrity in this industry. Developers and investors want to work with construction companies they can trust completely. In an industry where corruption scandals are common, you represent something rare." Derek understood. His reputation as the whistleblower who'd brought down Bernard Stevens had become valuable beyond his technical expertise. Clients wanted to work with Harvey and Associates because they knew Derek Harvey would never compromise ethical standards for financial gain. "I'll need to review any proposals with my attorney and accountant," Derek said, "but I'm interested in hearing more specific terms." Mario Benson slid a folder across the table. "Preliminary terms are outlined here. We're talking about expanding your operation to handle $200 million in annual revenue within 3 years, while maintaining your controlling interest in the company." Derek drove home that evening thinking about the transformation his life had undergone. 18 months ago, he'd been a mid-level employee fired for caring for his daughter. Now, he was being courted by major investors who saw his company as the foundation for a construction empire. At home, he found Kendra in the kitchen preparing dinner while Emma worked on homework at the kitchen table. The domestic scene reminded Derek of what truly mattered, the family values that had started this entire journey. "How was your meeting?" Kendra asked. Derek described the partnership proposal while helping Emma with her math homework. Kendra listened without interruption, her nursing background having taught her to absorb complex information before offering opinions. "What do you think?" Derek asked when he finished explaining. "I think you've built something remarkable based on principles that matter to you. The question is whether expanding maintains those principles or compromises them." Emma looked up from her homework. "Daddy, what's a construction empire?" Derek smiled at his daughter's question. "It's when someone builds a very big company that constructs lots of buildings and employs many people. Would you still be able to take me to school if you have an empire?" The question cut to the heart of Derek's concerns. "That's a very good question, Princess. The most important thing is making sure I can always be there when you need me." That evening, after Emma was in bed, Derek and Kendra sat at their kitchen table reviewing the partnership proposal. The financial terms were generous, the growth potential was substantial, and the market opportunity was clearly significant. "What does your instinct tell you?" Kendra asked. Derek considered the question carefully. "My instinct tells me this is the right opportunity at the right time, but only if we can structure it to maintain control over company culture and values. Then we negotiate from strength and make sure any partnership reflects what Harvey and Associates stands for." Derek looked around their kitchen, remembering the morning 18 months ago when he'd been fired for putting family first. That decision had led to the destruction of Bernard Stevens and the creation of Harvey and Associates. Now, those same values were the foundation for unprecedented opportunity. The next morning, Derek called Isaac Zhang to begin structuring negotiations that would transform Harvey and Associates from a regional construction company into a major commercial development partner, while maintaining the integrity that made it valuable. The empire Bernard Stevens had tried to destroy was about to become larger and more successful than Stevens and Associates had ever been. Chapter 9, Legacy. 1 year later, Derek Harvey stood on the observation deck of the newest Harvey and Associates project, a 30-story mixed-use development in the heart of downtown that would serve as the company's new headquarters. The building represented more than just another successful project. It symbolized the complete transformation of Derek's life and the vindication of the principles he'd refused to compromise. The partnership with Sean Platt and Mario Benson had proven highly successful. Harvey and Associates now employed over 200 people, maintained offices in 4 states, and had projects under development worth more than $300 million. More importantly, the company had maintained its reputation for absolute integrity and quality workmanship. Derek's phone buzzed with a text from Isaac Zhang. Stevens' sentencing hearing scheduled for next Tuesday. Federal prosecutor wants your impact statement. Bernard Stevens had spent the past 2 years fighting his conviction through appeals and motions, all unsuccessful. His final sentencing hearing would bring closure to a legal process that had consumed enormous resources and generated significant media attention. Wilson Stevens appeared on the observation deck, carrying project reports Derek had requested. The young man had developed into one of Harvey and Associates' most capable project managers, earning respect through competence rather than family connections. Mr. Harvey, the Morrison Tower project is ahead of schedule and under budget, Wilson reported. Final inspections are scheduled for next month. Derek accepted the reports, still amazed by Wilson's transformation. How are you feeling about your uncle's sentencing hearing? Wilson's expression grew serious, relieved that it's finally ending. Uncle Bernard made his choices, and now he has to face the consequences. I'm grateful you gave me the opportunity to make different choices. The sentencing hearing took place in the same federal courthouse where Derek had testified 2 years earlier. The courtroom was crowded with reporters, former Stevens and Associates employees, and federal agents who had worked the case. Bernard Stevens looked older and smaller than Derek remembered. Prison had not been kind to him. He'd lost significant weight, his hair had gone completely white, and his expensive suits had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit. Federal Judge Eleanor Olson, known for stern sentencing in white-collar crime cases, reviewed the case details before addressing Bernard directly. Mr. Stevens, you operated a sophisticated criminal enterprise that laundered millions in drug money, defrauded federal agencies, and attempted to frame an honest employee for your crimes. Your actions damaged the construction industry's reputation and betrayed the trust of clients and employees. Derek was called to provide his victim impact statement. Standing at the podium, facing the man who had tried to destroy his career and family, Derek felt no anger, only satisfaction that justice was finally being served. Your Honor, Bernard Stevens' crimes went beyond financial fraud. He created a workplace culture where integrity was discouraged and corruption was rewarded. He attempted to use my reputation and documentation to shield his criminal activities, and when that failed, he tried to frame me as a scapegoat. Derek paused, looking directly at Bernard. But his greatest crime was teaching young employees like his nephew that success comes from corruption rather than competence. The damage to individuals and industry standards extends far beyond the financial losses. Judge Olson sentenced Bernard Stevens to 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole before serving 20 years. Additional restitution orders would strip him of virtually all remaining assets. Outside the courthouse, Derek was approached by reporters seeking his reaction to the sentence. Justice has been served, Derek said simply. Mr. Stevens chose to build his success on corruption and fraud. Today's sentence demonstrates that those choices have consequences. Mr. Harvey, how does it feel to see the man who fired you sentenced to decades in prison? Asked a reporter from the Business Journal. Derek considered the question carefully. I don't take pleasure in anyone's downfall, but I'm satisfied that the justice system worked and that other potential criminals will see that integrity matters more than short-term profits. That evening, Harvey and Associates held its annual company meeting in the conference room of their new headquarters. Derek addressed the entire staff, including original employees like Mike Bird and recent hires who joined the company's rapid expansion. When I started this company, my goal was simple: prove that businesses built on integrity and competence could succeed better than those built on corruption and shortcuts, Derek told the assembled employees. All of you have made that vision a reality. The company's success metrics were impressive: 0 safety violations across all projects, 100% on-time completion rate, client satisfaction scores above 95%, and profit margins that allowed for competitive salaries and comprehensive benefits. But our real success isn't measured in dollars or projects, Derek continued. It's measured by the culture we've built. One where doing the right thing is always the priority, where family comes first, and where every employee can be proud of their work. After the meeting, Derek drove to Emma's school to pick her up from soccer practice. Now 10 years old, Emma had followed the Stevens case with the intense interest of someone who understood her father's role in bringing down the bad man who had tried to hurt their family. "Daddy, did the judge put the bad man in jail for a long time?" Emma asked as they drove home. "Yes, princess. For a very long time." "Good. He was mean to you and tried to get you in trouble for taking care of me when I was sick." Derek smiled at his daughter's clear sense of justice. "That's right. But because we did the right thing, even when it was hard, everything worked out okay. And now you have a big company that builds important buildings?" "That's right. And someday, if you want to, maybe you can help run the company too." Emma considered this seriously. "I think I'd like that. But first, I want to be a doctor like Dr. Martinez so I can help sick kids feel better." At home, Derek found Kendra in their living room reading a medical journal. She'd recently completed her nurse practitioner degree and was considering opening her own clinic specializing in pediatric care. "How did the sentencing go?" she asked. 25 years. Bernard Stevens will be in his 80s before he's eligible for parole." Kendra nodded with satisfaction. "Good. And how do you feel about it finally being over?" Derek sat beside his wife, looking around their home, comfortable but not ostentatious, furnished with quality pieces chosen for durability rather than display. The values that had guided their decisions throughout the Stevens crisis continue to shape their choices now. "I feel like we've completed something important," Derek said. "Not just bringing down Bernard Stevens, but proving that the principles we believe in actually work." "What's next?" Derek pulled out his phone and showed Kendra a message he'd received that afternoon from the Small Business Administration. "They want me to speak at a national conference about ethical business practices and whistleblower protection. You become quite the public speaker. I've become someone who understands that silence enables corruption. If sharing our story helps other people make better choices, then it's worth the public attention." Later that night, Derek stood on the back porch of their home, looking up at the stars. The same stars he'd looked at 18 months ago when he'd made the phone call that changed everything. The decision to expose Bernard Stevens had cost Derek his job, but given him something more valuable: proof that integrity wasn't just idealistic but practical. Harvey and Associates would continue growing, expanding into new markets and larger projects. But the foundation would always remain the same: family first, integrity second. Everything else would fall into place after that. Derek's phone buzzed with one final message of the day. Wilson Lester was forwarding congratulations from clients, competitors, and industry organizations celebrating the conclusion of the Stevens case and praising Harvey and Associates' success. But the message Derek appreciated most came from Mike Bird, now Harvey and Associates Director of Safety and Compliance. "Mr. Harvey, thank you for showing all of us that doing the right thing really does matter. The industry is better because of what you did." Derek Harvey had started as a construction manager who refused to compromise his principles. He'd become a successful businessman who proved that integrity wasn't just morally right, but economically practical. Most importantly, he'd shown his daughter that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, was always the right choice. As Derek headed inside to join his family, he felt the deep satisfaction that comes from building something meaningful on a foundation of truth. The war with Bernard Stevens was long over, but the victory belonged to everyone who chose integrity over expedience, family over profits, and truth over convenience. The legacy Derek Harvey would leave wasn't just a successful company. It was proof that good people could win when they refused to compromise their values. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Perfect Facades. Dwayne Blackwell had built his life on precision. At 38, he commanded respect in every room he entered. Whether it was the boardroom of his private security firm, the garage where he restored vintage motorcycles, or the pristine suburban home where he'd raised his daughter for 9 years. His steel-gray eyes missed nothing, a trait that had served him well during his time in military intelligence before he'd started Blackwell Securities. Those same eyes now watched his wife Claire Santos Blackwell through the kitchen window as she tended to her garden, her 8-month pregnant belly making her movements careful and deliberate. They'd met 12 years ago when she was a struggling art student and he was fresh out of the service, hungry to build something meaningful. She'd been everything he thought he wanted: beautiful, artistic, seemingly devoted to family. "Dad, can we go see Mom's paintings in the studio?" 9-year-old Emma Blackwell asked, tugging at his sleeve. Emma had inherited his observational skills and Claire's artistic eye, creating an unusually perceptive child who often noticed things adults missed. "Later, sweetheart. Your mother needs rest before the baby comes." Dwayne ruffled his daughter's dark hair, identical to his own. Emma was his pride, sharp, loyal, and unafraid to speak her mind. Claire had been acting strange lately, distant in ways that went beyond pregnancy. Phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered rooms, new friends she'd met at prenatal yoga, but never introduced him to, and an odd defensiveness about her art studio that she'd converted from the guest house 6 months ago. Dwayne's instincts, honed by years of investigating corporate espionage and personal betrayals for his clients, whispered warnings he'd chosen to ignore. The contractions started at 3 a.m. on a rain-soaked Tuesday. Claire's grip on his hand was fierce as they rushed to Mercy General. Emma staying with his sister Merle Blackwell for the night. Labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 18 hours. During those endless hours in the waiting room, Dwayne found himself studying Claire's face during her brief moments of rest, searching for something he couldn't name. "It's a boy," Dr. Patricia Vance announced as she emerged from the delivery room, exhaustion evident in her voice. "Both mother and baby are healthy. You can see them shortly." Dwayne felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. A son, someone to carry on the Blackwell name, to teach everything he knew about strength, loyalty, and never showing weakness to those who might exploit it. Chapter 2. The Innocent Eye. The next morning, Dwayne picked up Emma from Merle's house. His sister, a stern woman who'd never married and devoted herself to her career as a forensic accountant, studied his face with the same analytical intensity that ran in their family. "You look like hell, Dwayne. When's the last time you slept?" Merle handed him a cup of black coffee, strong enough to wake the dead. "Been at the hospital. Claire had the baby last night, a boy." He should have felt more joy saying those words, but something hollow echoed in his chest. Emma's face lit up with genuine excitement. "Can we go see him?" "And Mom, that's the plan. Get your things." The drive to Mercy General was filled with Emma's chatter about baby names and how she'd teach her little brother to draw. Dwayne found himself only half listening, his mind churning through fragments of suspicion he'd suppressed for months. Claire's sudden interest in ethnic art 6 months ago, the way she'd started working out at a gym across town instead of their usual place, how she'd become protective of her phone, taking it everywhere, even to the bathroom. At the hospital, they navigated the maze of corridors to the maternity ward. Room 314 was painted in soft pastels, morning sunlight streaming through the windows. Claire sat propped up in bed, looking radiant despite her exhaustion. In her arms was a bundle wrapped in blue blankets. Emma, Dwayne, come meet your son. Claire's smile seemed forced, her eyes not quite meeting Dwayne's as they approached. Emma practically bounced on her toes as she looked at the baby. He's so small. What are we going to name him? We'll figure that out, Dwayne said, extending his arms. Can I hold him? Claire hesitated for just a moment, but it was enough for Dwayne to notice. When she finally handed over the infant, Dwayne looked down at his supposed son for the first time. The baby had Claire's delicate features, but something was wrong. The skin tone was darker than either of his parents, and the facial structure was distinctly different. Most telling were the eyes. When they opened briefly, they were a deep brown, almost black, nothing like Dwayne's gray or Claire's green. Emma stood on her tiptoes to get a better look, and Dwayne watched his daughter's expression change. Her artistic eye, trained to notice color and proportion, caught what any adult might rationalize away. Her face went pale, and she tugged urgently at Dwayne's sleeve. Dad, can I talk to you outside? Right now. Claire's face tightened. Emma, don't you want to hold your brother? In a minute, Mom. Emma's voice was steady, but Dwayne could see the confusion and something like fear in her eyes. They stepped into the hallway, Emma pulling him away from the room until they were out of earshot. Dad, didn't you notice? That baby is... Emma struggled for words, then whispered, That's not your baby. He doesn't look like us at all. Dwayne felt the world tilt. His daughter's innocent observation confirmed what his subconscious had already registered. 9 years old, and Emma had spotted what he'd been too emotionally invested to see immediately. Are you sure, sweetheart? I'm positive. Remember when I drew that family portrait last month? I pay attention to faces, Dad. That baby, he looks like someone else. Dwayne's hands began to shake, not with fear, but with a cold rage that started in his chest and spread through his entire body. In that sterile hospital corridor, watching his daughter's concerned face, something fundamental shifted inside him. The man who'd built his reputation on loyalty, who'd provided for his family without question, who'd trusted completely, felt that trust shatter into razor-sharp fragments. Go back in there and act normal, he told Emma quietly. Don't say anything to your mother. Can you do that for me? Emma nodded solemnly. What are you going to do? Dwayne pulled out his phone, his military training kicking in to suppress the emotional chaos and focus on necessary action. I'm going to find out the truth. Chapter 3. The Call. They returned to the room where Claire was adjusting her hospital gown, avoiding eye contact. The baby slept peacefully, oblivious to the storm gathering around him. He's beautiful, Dwayne said, his voice carefully neutral as he handed the infant back to Claire. Have you thought about names? I was thinking maybe Marcus. Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. Marcus. Dwayne repeated the name, filing away every detail of Claire's behavior. That's a strong name. Emma climbed onto the visitor's chair, her face carefully composed despite what she'd just revealed. At 9 years old, she already understood the gravity of adult secrets. I should call my office, let them know I'll be taking paternity leave, Dwayne said, pulling out his phone. I'll be right back. He stepped in the hallway and dialed a number he'd memorized years ago, but never thought he'd need to use personally. Blackwell Securities, Stanford Lindsay speaking. Stanford was his head of investigations, a former police detective with 20 years of experience uncovering lies for a living. They'd worked together for 5 years, and Stanford had never failed to deliver truth, no matter how ugly. Stan, it's Dwayne. I need you to drop everything and start a full investigation. Boss, I thought you were at the hospital with a new baby. Everything okay? No, everything is not okay. Dwayne's voice was ice cold. I need you to investigate my wife. Full background, recent activities, phone records, financial transactions, everything. And I need it fast. There was a pause. Stanford had been around long enough to know that when Dwayne Blackwell used that tone, someone was about to have their world destroyed. How fast are we talking? 24 hours for preliminary findings. And Stan, this stays between us until I decide otherwise. Understood. What's the priority focus? Dwayne looked back toward Claire's room, where he could hear her talking softly to Emma about the baby. Infidelity. I need to know who, when, where, and how long it's been going on. I'll start immediately. Anything else? Yeah. Run a genetic marker prediction on the baby if you can get the information. I have reason to believe he's not mine. Another pause. Jesus, Dwayne. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just give me facts. Dwayne ended the call and stood in the hallway for a moment, letting the rage build and then crystallize into something harder and more dangerous. Purpose. He'd built his business on the principle that truth always surfaced and betrayal always had consequences. He'd just never expected to apply those principles to his own family. When he returned to the room, Claire looked up nervously. Everything okay with work? Just arranging time off to be with my family, Dwayne replied, and the word family tasted like ash in his mouth. Over the next hour, he watched Claire interact with the baby and Emma, cataloging every gesture, every word, every micro-expression. His daughter, bless her observant heart, played her part perfectly, cooing over the baby while shooting meaningful glances at her father. A nurse came in to check on Claire and the baby. Mr. Blackwell, would you like to hold your son while I examine Mom? Of course. Dwayne took the infant again, this time studying every feature clinically. The baby's hair was darker and cullier than either parent. The nose was broader, the lips fuller. Even the way the baby's fingers curled was different from Emma's baby pictures. He's going to be a heartbreaker, the nurse said cheerfully. Look at those beautiful features. Claire's face went white, and Dwayne saw her hands tremble as she adjusted her blanket. Yes, Dwayne said quietly, he certainly has distinctive features. After the nurse left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Emma broke it by announcing she was hungry, which gave Dwayne an excuse to take her to the cafeteria. Dad, I can tell you're really angry, Emma said as they sat with sandwiches neither of them was eating. I'm not angry at you, sweetheart. You did the right thing telling me what you noticed. What happens now? Dwayne looked at his daughter, his real daughter, the one person in this mess he could trust completely. Now I find out exactly what's been going on, and then I decide what to do about it. Will you and Mom get divorced? The question hit him like a physical blow, but he kept his expression calm. I don't know yet, but I promise you this. Whatever happens, you'll be protected. You'll always be my priority. Emma nodded, then asked with the directness only children possessed. Are you going to hurt the people who hurt us? Dwayne set down his sandwich and looked directly into his daughter's eyes that were exactly like his own. Emma, when someone betrays your trust, when they lie to you and try to make you believe something that isn't true, what do you think should happen to them? They should face consequences, Emma said without hesitation. That's right. They should face consequences. As they returned to Claire's room, Dwayne's phone buzzed with a text from Stanford. Found something already. Call me when you can. Dwayne felt a cold smile touch his lips. The investigation was just beginning, but he already knew how it would end. Claire had made the mistake of betraying a man who'd built his career on destroying people who thought they could lie and get away with it. She was about to learn that Dwayne Blackwell never forgave, and he never forgot. Chapter 4: Unraveling Threads. Dwayne left Claire and the baby at the hospital under the pretense of getting Emma settled and handling work emergencies. The drive home was silent except for Emma's occasional questions about what would happen next, to which Dwayne gave carefully measured answers. He'd learned long ago that information was power, and even with his daughter, he shared only what she needed to know. Their house, a sprawling ranch-style home in an upscale suburb, felt different now. What had once been a sanctuary now felt like a crime scene waiting to be investigated. Dwayne sent Emma to her room to rest while he headed to his home office, a soundproofed room where he handled sensitive client matters. Stanford answered on the first ring. Boss, you're not going to like what I found. Tell me. I started with her phone records since those are easiest to access. Claire's been having regular communication with someone named Jamal Fuller for the past 8 months. Calls, texts, the works. The frequency increased dramatically around the time the baby would have been conceived. Dwayne's grip on the phone tightened. Tell me about Fuller. 35 years old, African-American, works as a personal trainer at Elite Fitness across town. That's the gym Claire started going to 6 months ago. He's divorced, no kids, clean criminal record. Lies in an apartment complex about 10 minutes from a gym. 8 months, Dwayne repeated. That timing fits. There's more. I pulled security footage from the gym's parking lot for the past month before you called. Claire's been meeting Fuller there 3 times a week, but they're not always going inside. Sometimes they sit in his car for an hour. Sometimes they leave together. Dwayne felt the familiar, cold calculation settling over him. Where do they go? Still working on that, but I found something interesting. Fuller has a key to a storage unit across town. Rented it 4 months ago, pays in cash. I'm thinking it might be where they've been meeting. Good work. What else? I'm running a deeper background on Fuller, looking into his finances, his connections, his habits. I should have a full profile by tonight. But Dwayne, Stanford's voice carried a note of concern. What are you planning to do with this information? I'm planning to make sure that the truth comes out and that there are appropriate consequences for everyone involved. That's what I'm afraid of. Look, I know you're hurting, but don't do anything that's going to land you in prison. Dwayne's laugh was devoid of humor. Stanford, I've spent 5 years helping clients destroy people who betrayed them, and I've never left fingerprints. I'm not about to start getting sloppy now. After ending the call, Dwayne sat in his office chair, staring at the wall covered with military commendations and business achievements. Everything he'd built, everything he believed in, had been built on a foundation of lies. But lies could be weaponized just as effectively as truth. Emma appeared in his doorway, holding her favorite stuffed animal. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. If someone lies to you for a long time and you find out, does that mean everything they ever said was a lie? The question hit deeper than she probably intended. Not everything, but it means you can never trust them again. And once trust is broken, it can never be truly repaired. Emma nodded solemnly. I don't think I want to go back to the hospital today. You don't have to. We'll visit your mother tomorrow. That evening, while Emma slept, Dwayne drove to Elite Fitness. The gym was closed, but he sat in his car across the street, studying the building and the surrounding area. His phone rang. Stanford again. I've got more information on Fuller. This guy's got some interesting connections. Such as, he's got a side business, personal training for wealthy women, if you know what I mean. I found at least 3 other married clients who he's been unusually close to. One of them is Dr. Patricia Vance. Dwayne felt a chill. The doctor who delivered the baby? The same. And get this, Fuller's been making deposits into a separate bank account, large amounts in cash for the past year. My guess is he's been running some kind of operation targeting married women. A predator. More than that, I think he specifically targets women with wealthy husbands. Claire fits the profile perfectly. Dwayne ended the call and continued watching the gym. Plans were forming in his mind, not just for revenge, but for complete destruction. If Fuller was targeting multiple women, then there were multiple husbands who deserved to know the truth. And if Dr. Vance was involved, then there were professional ethics violations that could destroy her career. But first, he needed to confirm paternity. Chapter 5. The Trap Sets. The next morning, Dwayne returned to the hospital with Emma, armed with new information and a carefully constructed plan. He'd spent the night researching DNA testing procedures and making arrangements that would give him leverage over everyone involved in his wife's betrayal. Claire looked nervous when they entered her room. The baby, whom she'd apparently decided to name Marcus without his input, was sleeping in a bassinet beside her bed. "How did you sleep?" Dwayne asked, kissing her forehead in what appeared to be a loving gesture. "Fine. The nurses said we can probably go home tomorrow." "That's wonderful." Dwayne pulled out his phone. "I've been thinking about the birth announcement. We should take some professional photos, document this moment for our family." Claire's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "Maybe we should wait until we're home. I don't look my best right now." "You look beautiful. Besides, I already called a photographer. He specializes in newborn portraits. Very discreet. Comes highly recommended." Dwayne showed her his phone screen, which displayed the contact information for a man who was actually one of his investigators. "He'll be here this afternoon." While Claire tried to find reasons to object, Emma played with the baby, her young face a perfect mask of innocence despite knowing the terrible truth. "The photographer will need to document the baby's features carefully," Dwayne continued. "Apparently, they use high-resolution cameras to capture every detail. It's amazing what modern technology can reveal about family resemblances. Claire went pale. Maybe we should just wait. Claire, this is our son's first day of life being documented. It's important. Dwayne's voice carried just enough insistence to make refusing seem suspicious. Dr. Vance entered the room for a routine check, and Dwayne watched her interaction with Claire carefully. There was a familiarity there that went beyond professional courtesy. Shared glances, a touch that lingered too long on Claire's shoulder. "How are we feeling today?" Dr. Vance asked. "Ready to go home," Claire replied quickly. "Well, everything looks good. We'll just need to complete the birth certificate paperwork and run a few final tests." Dr. Vance glanced at Dwayne. "Mr. Blackwell, we'll need your signature on several documents." "Of course. Actually, doctor, I have a question about genetic testing. Is it standard procedure to run DNA verification for birth certificates?" Dr. Vance's professional smile faltered slightly. "That's not typically necessary unless there are specific medical concerns. I'm just thinking about family medical history, hereditary conditions, that sort of thing. I want to make sure we have complete records for Marcus's future healthcare needs. We can discuss that if you'd like, but it's not urgent." Dwayne nodded agreeably, but he noticed how Dr. Vance and Claire exchanged another glance. The doctor left quickly after that, and Claire remained silent for several minutes. "Dwayne," she finally said, "there's something I need to tell you." Emma looked up from the baby, her eyes wide. Dwayne felt his pulse quicken, but kept his expression neutral. "What is it?" Claire's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice. I haven't been completely honest about everything." "About what?" For a moment, it seemed like she might confess everything. But then her phone buzzed with a text message, and Dwayne saw her glance at it and make a decision. The pregnancy was harder than I let on. I didn't want you to worry. It was a lie, and they both knew it." But Dwayne simply nodded and squeezed her hand. "You can tell me anything, Claire. You know that." That afternoon, the photographer arrived. Actually, Julius Suarez, one of Dwayne's most skilled investigators. He carried professional camera equipment and charmed Claire with talk about capturing the perfect family moment. "I'll need several shots of the baby alone," Julius explained, setting up his equipment. "Close-ups that capture all his unique features. Parents are always amazed at how much detail these high-resolution images show." As Julius worked, taking dozens of photos from every angle, Dwayne noticed Claire becoming increasingly agitated. When Julius asked for family shots, placing Dwayne next to the baby, Claire interrupted. "Maybe we should do this later. Marcus seems fussy." "He looks perfectly content to me," Dwayne replied. "Let's get these done now." The session lasted an hour, with Julius capturing every detail that would later be analyzed by experts. Before leaving, he handed Dwayne a card. "I'll have the proofs ready by tomorrow. These are going to be beautiful family portraits." After Julius left, Dwayne excused himself to make phone calls. In the hallway, he dialed Stanford. "How's our investigation progressing?" "I've got everything you need. Fuller's been playing this game for over 2 years. I've identified 5 other women he's been involved with, all married to wealthy men. Dr. Vance has been covering for him, falsifying medical records, helping establish false paternity. It's a whole operation. Evidence, photos, financial records, communications. I've also been monitoring Fuller's movements. He's planning to meet Claire tonight." "Tonight?" "She's still in the hospital. He's coming here. I followed him to the parking garage 20 minutes ago. He's been sitting in his car, waiting." Dwayne felt a cold smile spread across his face. "Perfect. Time to accelerate our timeline." Chapter 6. Convergence. Dwayne returned to Claire's room to find her checking her phone nervously. Emma was napping in the visitor's chair, exhausted by the emotional weight she'd been carrying. "I need to run home and get some things for tomorrow," Dwayne announced. "Will you be okay here with Emma?" "Actually," Claire said quickly, "maybe you should take Emma home. She looks tired, and I could use some rest." "Are you sure? I don't like leaving you alone." "I'll be fine. The nurses check on me every hour." Dwayne pretended to consider this. "Okay, but I'll be back later tonight to check on you." He gently woke Emma and helped her gather her things. As they prepared to leave, he kissed Claire goodbye, noting how she avoided eye contact. Rest well. I'll see you tonight. In the parking garage, Dwayne spotted Fuller's car immediately. A black Mustang parked in a corner spot with tinted windows. He drove Emma home and called his sister Merle to come stay with her. I need you to keep Emma tonight, he told Merle when she arrived. There's something I need to handle. Merle studied his face with her sharp accountant's eye. This is about Claire, isn't it? Yes. What did she do? What do you think she did? Merle's expression hardened. That foolish girl. She has no idea who she's dealing with, does she? No, she doesn't. But she's about to learn. Dwayne returned to the hospital around 9 p.m., but instead of going to Claire's room, he positioned himself in the parking garage with a clear view of Fuller's car. He didn't have to wait long. At 9:30, he watched Claire emerge from the hospital's side entrance, the same exit used by staff to avoid the main lobby. She was still in her hospital gown, but had thrown a coat over it. She moved carefully, obviously still recovering from childbirth, but her destination was clear. She reached Fuller's car and got into the passenger seat. Dwayne started his engine and followed at a distance as they drove to a 24-hour diner across town. Through the window, he watched them sit in a corner booth, their conversation intense and clearly emotional. Claire was crying. Fuller was holding her hands across the table. Dwayne called Stanford. Are you recording this? Every word. I've got directional microphones and cameras set up. They're discussing what to do now that you're suspicious. And Fuller wants her to leave you. Take the baby and disappear with him. But Claire's afraid. She knows you too well. She's telling him about your military background, your business, how you destroy people for a living. Smart woman. What's Fuller's response? He's telling her it doesn't matter, that you can't touch them if they disappear. He's got it all planned out. New identities, a place to go. Apparently, he's done this before. Dwayne felt his anger crystallize into something harder and more focused. Give me everything you have on his previous disappearances. I want to know every detail of his operation. Already on it. Boss, they're planning to leave tomorrow night. Claire's going to fake a postpartum emergency, get discharged early, and meet him. Perfect. That gives us 24 hours to prepare a welcome committee. Dwayne watched as Fuller and Claire said their goodbyes in the diner parking lot. The kiss they shared was long and desperate, the embrace of two people who thought they were about to escape consequences. They had no idea that Dwayne Blackwell had never let anyone escape consequences in his life, and he wasn't about to start now. As he followed Claire back to the hospital, Dwayne's phone rang. It was Julius with the photo analysis results. No question about it, boss. That baby isn't yours. Facial structure, skin tone, hair texture, everything points to Fuller being the father. I've got comparison photos that make it undeniable. Good. Add those to the evidence file. Dwayne watched Claire slip back into the hospital, probably thinking she'd been clever. She had no idea that her husband had just watched her seal her own fate. Tomorrow would be a very interesting day. Chapter 7. The Web Titans. Dawn broke gray and cold as Dwayne sat in his office, surrounded by the fruits of Stanford's investigation. Photos, financial records, phone logs, and surveillance footage covered every surface. The evidence painted a clear picture of betrayal that went deeper than simple adultery. Jamal Fuller wasn't just a predator. He was a professional con artist who specialized in targeting wealthy married women. Over the past 3 years, he'd seduced 5 women, gotten 2 of them pregnant, and then blackmailed their husbands for silence money before disappearing with his victims. Dr. Patricia Vance had been providing medical cover, falsifying records and paternity information in exchange for a cut of the profits. Claire had been their latest mark, but they'd made a critical error in targeting Dwayne Blackwell. Everything's in place, Stanford reported via phone. Fuller thinks he's meeting Claire tonight at the storage unit to collect their escape fund and finalize plans. He has no idea we've been monitoring their communications. And Dr. Vance? She's scheduled for a meeting with the hospital's ethics board tomorrow morning. Seems someone submitted an anonymous complaint about falsified medical records, with substantial evidence attached. Dwayne smiled coldly. Excellent. What about the other families? I prepared information packets for all of Fuller's previous victims' husbands. They'll receive them this afternoon. Photos, evidence, everything they need to understand what happened to their families. Good. Make sure each packet includes Fuller's current location and tonight's meeting details. Emma appeared in his office doorway, still in her pajamas. Dad, what are you doing? Dwayne quickly covered the most damaging photos. Just work, sweetheart. Did you sleep well? Not really. I keep thinking about Mom and the baby. Emma climbed into the chair across from his desk. Are you going to forgive her? The question hung in the air between them. Dwayne studied his daughter's face. So young, but already learning that the world was full of people who would lie and betray those who trusted them. Emma, what would you do if someone stole something precious from you, then lied about it for months? I'd want them to give it back and say they were sorry. But what if they couldn't give it back? What if the thing they stole was time and trust and the feeling of being safe in your own family? Emma considered this seriously. Then I guess I'd want them to face consequences. That's right. And sometimes consequences are the only way people learn not to hurt others. Merle arrived at noon to watch Emma while Dwayne handled business. His sister's farewell was characteristically blunt. Do what needs to be done, but don't leave evidence. At the hospital, Dwayne found Claire packing her things. The baby slept in his carrier, oblivious to the storm gathering around him. Ready to go home? Dwayne asked cheerfully. Yes. I can't wait to get out of here. Claire's nervousness was palpable. I've arranged for a car service to take you home. I have some urgent business to handle this afternoon, but I'll be back for dinner. Relief flashed across Claire's face. That's fine. I'll probably rest anyway. Dwayne helped load their things, noting how Claire kept checking her phone. When they reached the house, he made a show of settling her and the baby in their bedroom before announcing he had to leave. Take care of yourself, he said, kissing her forehead. I'll see you tonight. As soon as he left, Dwayne circled back and parked where he could watch the house. Within an hour, a taxi arrived. Claire emerged with a small bag and the baby, moving quickly despite her recent surgery. She was heading to the storage unit where Fuller waited, thinking they were about to start their new life together. They had no idea they were walking into a trap that had been months in the making. Chapter 8. The Hunters Become the Hunted. The storage facility was on the industrial side of town, a sprawling complex of metal buildings and narrow alleys that provided perfect cover for surveillance. Dwayne arrived first, positioning himself with a clear view of Unit 247 where Fuller had been meeting his victims. Stanford's voice crackled through his earpiece. Fuller's inside, waiting. I count 3 cars approaching from different directions. Looks like those other husbands got our message. Through his binoculars, Dwayne watched as a taxi pulled up to the storage unit. Claire got out, carrying the baby in a small bag. She looked around nervously before knocking on the metal door. Fuller opened it immediately, pulling her inside. Dwayne could see them through the partially opened door, embracing, talking rapidly, making final preparations for their escape. Phase 2, Dwayne said into his microphone. 3 cars converged on the storage facility. From the first emerged Marcus Cervantes, an oil executive whose wife had been Fuller's victim 8 months ago. From the second came Fritz Charles, a federal prosecutor whose marriage had imploded after Fuller's manipulation. The third car held Elliot Garrison, a former Marine whose wife had killed herself after Fuller abandoned her. These men had received Dwayne's evidence packets that afternoon. They'd learned the truth about their destroyed families, and they'd come for justice. Gentlemen, Dwayne said as they gathered around his position, the people who destroyed your families are in that unit, planning their next escape. Marcus Cervantes' face was carved from stone. My wife died in a car accident after Fuller left her. She was trying to drive to see him when she crashed. My kids lost their mother because of that bastard. For Charles cracked his knuckles. Fuller cost me my marriage, my kids' respect, and nearly my career. I want 5 minutes alone with him. Elliot Garrison said nothing, but his hands were steady and his eyes were cold. The look of a man who'd killed enemies of his country and wouldn't hesitate to kill enemies of his family. There's a back entrance, Dwayne explained. Stanford's been monitoring their communications. They're planning to leave in 30 minutes. Once they come out, they're going to find that their car won't start. Stanford made sure of that. When they're stranded and panicked, that's when we move. What about the baby? Marcus asked. The baby's innocent in this. We protect him at all costs. But Fuller and my wife, Dwayne's voice trailed off. They've made their choices. 28 minutes later, Fuller and Claire emerged from the storage unit. Claire carried the baby while Fuller loaded bags into his car. When he turned the key, nothing happened. Dwayne watched through his binoculars as Fuller tried the engine repeatedly, growing more agitated. Claire stood beside the car, bouncing the baby and looking around nervously. Now, Dwayne said. The four men emerged from the shadows simultaneously, surrounding Fuller's car. Claire screamed when she saw them, clutching the baby tighter. "Hello, Jamal," Dwayne said pleasantly. "I think it's time we had a conversation." Fuller's face went through several emotions: confusion, recognition, fear. "I don't know what you're talking about, man. You're just escaping with my wife and the child you fathered while lying to my family for 8 months," Dwayne interrupted. "Along with the money you've stolen from these other gentlemen's families." Claire looked between the men, finally understanding the scope of what was happening. "Dwayne, please, I can explain." "No explanations needed, Claire. We've been watching you for days. We know everything." Fritz Charles stepped forward, his prosecutor's voice carrying legal authority. "Jamal Fuller, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. And Dr. Patricia Vance is being arrested at this very moment for falsifying medical records." Fuller tried to run, but Elliot Garrison moved with military precision, taking him down in seconds. "You cost good people their families," Elliot said quietly. "Now you're going to pay for it." Chapter 9. Justice Served Cold. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town had been Dwayne's backup location for sensitive client meetings. Soundproof, isolated, and completely off any official records. Now it served as a courtroom where real justice would be dispensed. Fuller sat zip-tied to a metal chair, his face swollen from Elliot's takedown. Claire sat nearby, holding the baby, her eyes wide with terror as she finally understood who her husband really was. "Gentlemen," Dwayne addressed the other 3 husbands, "we're here because the legal system failed us. Fuller would have gotten a few years in minimum security, and my wife would have gotten half my assets in divorce court. That's not justice. That's just bureaucracy." Marcus Cervantes paced like a caged animal. "My wife died because of this bastard. My kids ask me every day why mommy had to go away. What am I supposed to tell them?" "You tell them," Dwayne replied, "that the man who hurt their mother faced real consequences." Stanford had provided detailed financial records showing Fuller's operation. Over 3 years, he destroyed 7 families, stolen over $2 million in blackmail and settlements, and left a trail of broken homes and traumatized children. "Claire," Dwayne said, turning to his wife, "you've been very quiet. Don't you have anything to say?" Claire's voice was barely a whisper. "I never meant for this to happen. Jamal said he loved me, that we could have a life together." "Shut up," Fuller snapped. "Just shut up and don't say anything else." Dwayne smiled coldly. "Actually, Jamal, I think Claire should tell us everything. How you approached her at the gym, how you made her feel special, how you convinced her to betray her family. I think these gentlemen would find it educational." Over the next hour, the full scope of Fuller's manipulation became clear. He'd targeted Claire specifically after researching Dwayne's business and wealth. The seduction had been calculated, designed to create maximum emotional dependence before revealing his true nature. The beautiful part, Fuller had bragged to Claire during one of their recorded conversations, is that by the time they figure out, we're gone and they're left dealing with the mess. But Fuller had miscalculated. He'd never encountered a man like Dwayne Blackwell. "Here's what's going to happen," Dwayne announced. "Fuller, you're going to sign a full confession detailing your operation, naming Dr. Vance as your accomplice, and providing bank account information for all the money you've stolen. That money is going to be returned to the families you've destroyed. And if I refuse?" Dwayne nodded to Elliot, who had been maintaining his military bearing throughout the proceedings. Elliot here served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He's an expert in interrogation techniques that leave no permanent marks. "How long do you think you'll last before you're begging to sign?" Fuller's bravado crumbled. "What about witness protection? I've got information on other operations." "No deals," Fritz Charles interrupted. "You're going to prison for a very long time, and we're going to make sure every inmate knows exactly what you did to families like theirs. As Fuller signed his confession, Dwayne turned to Claire. And you, my dear wife, what do you think your consequences should be? Claire was crying now, clutching the baby. Dwayne, please, I know I made mistakes, but... Mistakes? Dwayne's voice was deadly quiet. You destroyed our marriage, lied to my daughter, and tried to pass another man's child off as mine. Those aren't mistakes. Those are calculated betrayals. I'll do anything to make this right. There is no making this right, Claire. There's only consequences. Dwayne pulled out a legal document Stanford had prepared. Divorce papers. You're going to sign them, relinquishing all claims to marital assets, agreeing to supervise visitation with Emma only, and acknowledging that the child you're holding is not mine and therefore not entitled to any support from me. I'll have nothing. You'll have what you deserve, Marcus Cervantes said harshly, which is exactly nothing. Claire signed with shaking hands, her dreams of escape and new love crumbling around her. As dawn broke over the warehouse, Stanford arrived with 2 federal marshals, friends from his police days who specialized in making certain types of problems disappear permanently. Jamal Fuller, one of them, announced, "You're under arrest for interstate fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. The FBI has been very interested in your operation." As they led Fuller away, he looked back at Claire with pure hatred. "This isn't over, Blackwell." Dwayne's smile was colder than winter. "Yes, it is." 6 months later, Dwayne sat in his office reviewing the final reports on the Fuller case. Dr. Vance had lost her medical license and received a 5-year sentence for falsifying records. Fuller had been convicted on 17 counts and would spend the next 25 years in federal prison. The money he'd stolen had been recovered and returned to his victims. Emma knocked on his office door, now 10 years old and remarkably resilient after months of counseling and honest conversations about adult failures and consequences. "Dad, I finished my homework. Can we work on the motorcycle now?" Absolutely. They'd been restoring a 1967 Harley together, a project that gave them time to talk through everything that had happened. Emma had handled the truth better than most adults would have. But then again, she was a Blackwell. "Dad," Emma said as they worked on the engine, "do you ever miss Mom?" Dwayne considered the question carefully. "I miss the person I thought she was. But that person never really existed. Will you ever get married again?" "Maybe someday. But whoever I marry will have to understand that you and I are a team, and nothing comes between family loyalty." Emma smiled. "I like that." Claire had moved across the country with her baby, supported by a small allowance that would end when the child turned 18. She'd sent letters asking for forgiveness, for second chances, for understanding. Dwayne had returned them all unopened. Some betrayals were unforgivable. Some consequences were permanent. And Dwayne Blackwell had never been a man who believed in second chances for those who crossed him. The motorcycle engine roared to life, and Emma cheered with delight. They had a good life together, built on truth, loyalty, and the understanding that strength came from never tolerating betrayal. It was a lesson Emma would carry with her